It's now time for our first panel of the day. So the theme of today, as you know by now, is very much connecting the US and the continent. In 2021, 62% of fintech investments came from US-based investors. So our next panel is bringing together thought leaders and stakeholders from leading African fintechs, along with US-based investors, to discuss the state of Africa-USA fintech connection. To lead this panel, I would like to invite to the stage Thomas Debas, Managing Director and Chief Partnership Officer of the Office of Global Partnership of the US Department of State.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, I thought the breakfast was there. At least I had it, so. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a delight to be here and to have the honor of moderating this distinguished panel. So I'll start off just giving folks a context of why the U.S. Department of State is supporting an initiative of the sort, the FinTech Summit, and why you heard from my colleague, Assistant Secretary Toluri, why we care about it. So I want to take you back in the journey. If you've seen my gray hair, you know I'm old enough to be in this line of business for a while. So in 2008, I want to say 2007, 2008, there was a McKinsey report called Lions on the Move that talked a lot about Africa's emergence. And at that time, this is 2009, 2010, the Obama administration, with Vice Secretary Clinton at that time, who I worked for, talked about like we need to engage, we need to increase our engagement with the continent. And so I had the pleasure of trying to convince American institutions why they should look into Africa. So again, 2009, I think, 2008, 2009 timeframe during Obama. And one of the areas we focused on was innovation, especially startups and things like. We knew that from a comparative advantage perspective, the US ecosystem was strong and it still continues to be strong. And so we forged a partnership with an entity called Demo, which is a conference platform that was around at that time, it no longer exists, to launch a Demo Africa event. And I actually met a brother here who was with me at Demo Africa in Casablanca. But I tell you that story in a sense is that back in those days when I went to visit Silicon Valley, trying to let them know that they should look into Africa, was they gave me an audience, God bless them. But one of the most consistent messages I got at that time, this is in Palo Alto, they told me that you're asking us to go to Nairobi and Lagos and other places. They told me, we don't even invest in San Francisco. We invest in this 30-mile radius within Palo Alto Mountain Valley. But I tell you that story in a sense is that it is so satisfying. Currently, if you guys not subscribe to, there's a brother, what's his name, Emeka Ajene, who was a Demo Africa alum, who was the founder of Gozan, has a FinTech weekly newsletter that he put out, and I subscribe to it, and I read it with a great excitement when I see African startups are raising money in the US. It takes me back from 2009, 2010 days when those investors were telling me, for them, Africa and technology was an oxymoron. Now it's kind of the heartland of investment. And so that's the reason why our office continues to support initiatives of this sort, is that the future lies in the continent, and we need to be thinking about if you're going to build partnerships, you can't be partnering with the past. You got to partner with the future. And so this is the reason why this really matters for us, why the Partnerships Office continues to engage in this space, why diplomacy matters in this case. So I will pause on that example, and I'm going to ask my questions to my panel. And so I'll start off with each of them to kind of introduce themselves, top 2 minutes, who they are, what organizations they work for, and why the fintech ecosystem matters to them. So I'll go in order of where I'm sitting. So, Clay.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Bankole Falade. I am Chief Regulatory Officer for Flutterwave. A little bit about myself. I've got a 20+ odd years experience working in technology sectors across the continent in Africa. I spent time with, mobile telecommunications giants, MTN, IHS. I spent time with Visa Inc.'s team in West Africa before I joined Flutterwave. Happy to be here. My background is law, though these days I say I'm more of a business person than I've ever been a lawyer. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Mercy Eriawarian Susu, and I'm the Intensives Manager at Halcyon. We are a nonprofit social impact incubator that is based not too far from here in Georgetown. And we have the audacity to believe that the future of business is impact-driven. And as a result of that, we also believe that impact-driven businesses can shape the inclusivity and equity within society. And as a result of that, we like to fund and invest as well as support founders who are social impact entrepreneurs and help them to scale their ventures. And then to your question about why fintech is important, I would say for me, it's important because when you have inclusive fintech, you are empowering the growth of the economy and you're empowering the access for the many and not just the few. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Tomas, and thank you to the organizers. It's really a pleasure to be on the stage with these really impressive panelists. I'm Olga, and I'm with MasterCard. And a bit of background around why MasterCard is here. So Amazon isn't just a river, Apple isn't just a fruit, MasterCard isn't just a card company. We are a financial services and technology company whose mission is to help digital economies thrive. And for our company to thrive and to grow, we need economies to grow, and we need individuals to prosper. We're deeply committed to financial inclusion and digital inclusion. A few years ago, we committed to bring 500 million individuals into the financial services sector and offer basic tools like savings accounts, access to credit that they had never had before. In 2020, we met that goal, and we decided to double it. And now we're committed to bringing 1 billion people into the digital economy and 50 million small merchants, including 25 million female-owned businesses. And nowhere is the opportunity for impact bigger than in Africa. We do a lot of work there around financial and digital inclusion. We've increased our footprint from 4 offices to 18 in the last 10 years. We've tripled our workforce. We've committed to the Community Pass platform, which you heard about in the opening remarks, which currently has 3.5 million smallholder farmers and rural individuals having access to digital tools. So we're deeply committed to the continent, to financial inclusion, and to partnerships. My team works with governments, financial institutions, fintechs, other private sector players, NGOs, and sort of the wealth of the whole ecosystem to drive those big outcomes that we seek. Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. I'm Sakine Demanga. I lead FinTech for AWS, Amazon Web Services, as well as FinTech for Africa, as well for business development. I'm happy to be here, so thank you. Part of my role at AWS essentially is to help identify what we call the next hot startups or FinTechs globally. And essentially what we do is we aggregate those fintechs, make sure they're obviously building on AWS, but also provide them with guidance to grow and scale their businesses, whether it's through funding or providing them with advisory or go-to-market strategy on one-on-one services. Having said that, my role primarily is based in the US. I lead North America, but we realized in the last couple of months, or probably the last couple of years since I've been within AWS, that there's a huge contingency coming out of the African continent. Lots of funding coming out, obviously due to some of the hyperbolized valuations in 2020, but because of a lot of the opportunities we're seeing as well. And because of that, we decided to bridge the gap to figure out ways to actually work on the African continent continent a little bit more and a little bit more strategically, specifically within the fintech vertical. We'll probably talk a little bit about what we're doing in the continent soon, but that's essentially what I do. I am from Zambia. I'm originally Zambian. I've worked on the continent in fintech before, so I'm very familiar with how the market dynamics work, but I'm also slightly biased because I do think there's opportunity there. I know we've been talking about opportunity in Africa for years now, probably 15 plus years, about, this is the time for Africa, but I genuinely believe that in the last 6 years, we've actually seen some tangible growth happening in the market where lots of fintechs are actually taking ownership in terms of their future and dictating the nuances that are happening within the ecosystem from a fintech perspective. So I'm excited to be here and to speak to the rest of the panelists.
Thank you so much. Sakai, so I'll start with you. Speaking of Zambia, as you know, the Vice President just returned from there, and our office had the opportunity to support her trip. We had actually a private sector roundtable there, so I've heard nothing but amazing things about Zambia. So let me ask you a question about it. You've kind of hinted to it, but let me ask you a little bit. AWS seems to be doing a lot in the continent. You and I talked a little earlier. I spent some time with your colleague Charlotte in Ghana when we did a delegation there. And I was also met up with Amro Tain, the head of Africa out of Dubai. So there seems to be a significant amount of appetite for the continent. And I would love to hear from you in a sense of what are the specific things that you're providing aside from the appetite? Yeah. What menu of things are you bringing to the table to startups and to that ecosystem?
Right, so maybe let me take a step back. So AWS was actually created in Africa, right? So the notion of having this cloud service provider was created in Cape Town over some large dinner, apparently. That's the myth, that's what we hear. And so you could argue that AWS has had some kind of connection or tie to the continent since 2004. Having said that, popular perception of our business is an infrastructure play, and we obviously are focusing primarily on cloud services, which is really the bread and butter of our core value proposition. But within the last couple of years, I think we realized that we needed to actually focus on the market from a business perspective and not just so much, regions and zones or availability zones in the market. And so from a business perspective, in the last 3 years, the company had made a decision to be bullish in the market. And I'm going to be completely honest and transparent, probably a little bit delayed in terms of focusing on the continent from our perspective, because we're obviously focusing on our core value proposition. So within the last 3 years, we took a step back to figure out how can we actually provide value in the continent and what can we do? So we started very small, with small different initiatives, from kind of building different offices. We have offices in Lagos now. We have, contingencies in Nairobi. Obviously, Johannesburg and Cape Town are the biggest hubs right now on the continent, but we hope to do more on the continent. And then we decided to kind of identify partners that we saw would help us to kind of accelerate in the market. So from a fintech perspective, we identified, obviously, the African Fintech Summit, and one of the first things that we decided to do was create a white paper, creating some insight to what we're seeing in the market, how we're understanding the dynamics of the market, but also, how cloud can provide value to those markets. And while we did that, we realized a significant a portion of startups, not just fintech startups, were on our platform, and we weren't really doing more than just providing the value, the actual infrastructure. And so we created programs. So right now we essentially we launched an accelerator program targeted to only fintechs in Africa, primarily to help them, from the early stages. So we did some stats and we saw, there was between 2020 and 2023, 2022, there are about 3 times more startups that started building within Africa. And so in order to kind of help them scale their businesses, we created this accelerator program called the Fintech Accelerator Program. We launched it about 2 weeks ago, essentially to kind of help a lot of fintechs kind of grow their business and scale their businesses. So from providing them with mentors, providing them with one-on-one services to help kind of enable them to grow their businesses, help them and teach them how to fund a lot of get funding from a lot of the VCs, provide them with different nuances and services that Amazon and AWS can provide. And so that is something that's just kind of scratching the surface. We just kind of launched it 2 weeks ago. It's going to be closed in the 27th of April, so if anybody is interested in applying, I suggest that you do as soon as possible, but that's kind of one of the genesis of us kind of doing something that's a program-based focus, and then we're also creating something separate called the CTO Fellowship as well in the market to help enable different fintechs to grow their ecosystem and help them with architecture. So those are 2 things that are strategically focusing now from a program perspective. Having said that, we're literally just scratching the surface. Like I said earlier, I think we're slightly behind, and we hope to kind of catch up in terms of doing more in the market.
Thank you so much. So speaking of obviously your accelerator program, what you're doing, the input you need are startups. So let me jump to Mercy, and who works at Halcyon, and you guys create the oxygen chamber for these startups to create what they do. And I was wondering if you could share with us, I know we have collaborated with you in the Middle East and North Africa region around startups. Love for you to kind of share with us what you're doing in this space, so what type of startups are you supporting in the continent?
Thank you so much. I love that phrase, providing oxygen for startups, and I think it's probably very, very appropriate to the work that we do. I would like to say, first of all, what we do in terms of supporting startups is we provide them with business training, we provide investment readiness support, and we also provide them a community and a network, and just give them access to not just a network within Halcyon itself, but within the greater ecosystem here in the US. I would like to maybe share a couple of our founders who are our success stories in part, because their successes are our success, and that's the reason why I go to work every day. I think you may have all heard of Bizo Money. That's a founder that's based out of Ghana. They are a fintech that is providing digital banking solutions for the unbanked in Ghana. They recently completed their $1 million raise, and also acquired a small microfinance company as well. You'll be hearing from later a founder by the name of Ifeoma Udo Shicluded. Please vote for her when you do. Her venture is really the epitome of the whole idea that the future is not only African, it is female. And she is the founder of a fintech that provides financial education as well as funding to African women on the continent. And she recently was accepted into the Google program for Africa. And then I would also like to maybe mention a couple others. Kipa, which was a panelist member last year, they recently raised their 8.4 million, and they're focused on providing services for small businesses in payments and financial management. And if I have the ability to brag just a little bit further, not quite fintech, but fintech adjacent, is Wasoko, which was recently named one of the fastest growing African startups on the continent. And they provide services to small businesses as well on the continent. And I feel like there's a question that I missed.
Right, thank you so much. So I'm gonna go to Pankoli. By the way, if anybody told you this, but you were named for your job. It was an awesome name to have for someone who's in the fintech. But I realize Flutterware has been the poster child in terms of the fintech Africa startups. And I know you describe yourself an American company with African roots. That's how I describe myself. I'm an American with African roots, so I dig that. That's cool. But I'm wondering, what does that mean? Why is that important to you to describe yourself that way, from an American company perspective? And also, because you guys are huge potential to be great ancestors into the fintech side, because a lot of the fintech companies that are coming out are looking to you guys as the kind of the golden standard in terms of raising money, being a YC company and all that. If you could share with us in terms of the journey Flutterware has gone into today, and your plan to go to IPO, would love to hear that.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So I think, well, just background context, I think everyone probably knows who Flutterwave is, but just for background context. So we are actually a US-based company headquartered out of San Francisco, built and designed to provide solutions to infrastructure deficits and patchwork of fragmented payments that we find ourselves today on the continent of Africa. So we are actually, yes, a US company with African heritage. The bulk of our business and solutions we've built have been built on the continent for the continent of Africa. Started in 2016. Yes, we were one of the early YC combinational companies. YC was really instrumental to Flutterwave becoming what it is today. It helped us, get in touch with a great network of mentors, peers, and investors, and also exposed us to Silicon Valley, which has created the innovation and global mindsets that you have in Flutterwave today. Also, exposure to Silicon Valley has enabled us attract the right talent and skills people that are helping to build our business today. In terms of the future, yes, natural progression at some point, we will IPO. Obviously, that will be determined by a number of factors, including market conditions at that time. But our goal now is to be ready for the day when we do go that route. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Olga. You and I share a passion for public-private partnerships. So I know at least MasterCard have collaborated with us, with USAID and others, in creating a lot of things. Wondering if you could share with us, MasterCard's kind of, blueprint in terms of what it's doing in the continent and the fintech ecosystem, and how you're building partnerships.
Sure, thank you. So a couple of years ago, we realized that we actually have so many shared goals with the governments that in the countries where we work, around economic development, small business support, financial inclusion, carbon neutrality. And in COVID, this was accelerated even more. We had shared interests around getting income to people who are unemployed, helping small businesses stay open, rebuilding tourism, and a variety of topics. So my team really focuses on building those public-private partnerships with a commercial and business lens, not a corporate philanthropy lens, but a business lens to drive those shared goals. I'll give a couple of examples of the types of partnerships that we're building in Africa. One is around government disbursements, which we saw really tick up during COVID. So governments have subsidy programs, income programs, and support programs to vulnerable populations. But it's actually really hard to get money to those populations, especially if that individual doesn't have their own bank account or has a shared bank account with a spouse or a family member. We see a lot of what we call friendly fraud. And we partner with governments to make sure that when they have subsidies and programs, they get to the right people quickly, securely, and efficiently. A couple of examples. We're working with the Ministry of Education in South Africa to do their financial aid scheme for 700,000 low-income students that are attending higher education to support their finances and help them learn financial responsibility. And what I love about that program as well is that we're partnering with 4 local fintechs to deliver those services, support sort of the financial responsibility trainings and others at the last mile. So it builds partnership with the government, with MasterCard, and with 4 fintechs. Another example is work we've done in the Ministry of Social Welfare in Egypt that launched their first social disbursement program specifically to women and vulnerable women, and we helped 60,000 women get payments privately and securely and made sure that those payments went to them as intended. Another area we partner with governments is on small business, helping small businesses thrive in the digital economy. Increasingly, the digital economy is becoming the main economy, and if you're not online, if you don't have access to e-commerce, if you don't have sort of digital customers and digital tools, you're going to be left behind. So in Lagos, for example, we partnered with the National Employment State Trust, the State Employment Trust Fund, to support 70,000 small businesses in trainings and digital tools. We offer something called SME in a Box that allows those businesses to get online, find new customers, use digital tools to grow their business, and also grow the digital and fintech ecosystem there. Another example is in Morocco with the Ministry of Tourism. We have a big partnership with the Ministry of Tourism to help revive tourism after the COVID pandemic. And SMEs make up 96% of the tourism industry in Morocco, but again, are often left behind. And especially during the COVID pandemic, we're struggling. And we worked with them to do a pilot, which we're now scaling, to support 10,000 SMEs with something called Digital Futures. That was a partnership with the Ministry of Tourism and the UN World Tourism Organization to help, again, build the SME capabilities, help them attract customers, help them accept digital payments, bring them into the digital economy while also reinforcing Morocco's tourism industry. So that's a couple of examples. I can go on all day. We can catch up during a coffee break or lunch, but this is an area I'm really passionate in. Again, I think it takes a village to really make an impact and make a dent and help economies grow and thrive. And MasterCard is really happy to be sort of a convener and investor in building that village.
Thank you so much. So my next question is for everybody, and you guys could take turns to answer it. I know our lovely MC mentioned this, and I know Zacharias mentioned it. There has been a bit of an earthquake in the financial sector in the US. Its magnitude, I'll leave it to folks to opine what that would look like. And I know this administration has taken a very strong stand to make sure that the confidence in the banking system is strong. And the iconic bank in Silicon Valley Bank has been, it's been brought up now. And also we can't ignore the fact that there are tech companies I've seen a lot of layoffs. So in this type of environment, what are your thoughts in terms of how the markets, my question is an outlook question for you to give me, in a sense of how you're seeing it in your respective area. As a startup who's getting into the global markets, as Halcyon, as an incubator, what are the type of hesitations that you're seeing or excitement you're seeing from the startups within this environment? From a MasterCard perspective, you guys literally power the world in that sense. How are you seeing that? I know AWS is a tech company. So I just want for you to give us a little bit of your candid commentary in a sense of within this environment, within this kind of turmoil, how do you see the African fintech ecosystem? Because someone mentioned 60% of the investments are from the US. How do you think that will be impacted in that sense? So any one of you, go ahead, Flat.
Thank you for the question. I think what we'll see is more like a flight to quality against quantity. So it's, it'll be really difficult to raise capital now on the continent from the US, but doesn't mean, companies won't succeed, which is why I said be a flight to quality over quantity. So you probably won't find the number of deals you saw last year or the year before in the medium to short term, but you will still find that investors, have the appetite and would appreciate value being created by, African startups and African companies. And so if you're able to demonstrate that quality, I think you will still get money. Yeah.
Great. Go ahead, Olga.
Okay. I think I would say for us, one of the things that we do is try to maintain our relationships with our fellows even long after they've been with us, because we understand that supporting them on their journey is not just the duration of time that they're within the Halcyon space. And so we are finding that, especially in the wake of everything to do with SVB, that we have had to kind of come alongside them and provide either access to other institutional partners who can help bridge the gap and help them weather the storm. And we like to say that once a fellow joins Halcyon, you're in a family. So it's our mission to make sure that we are walking along them along the entire entrepreneurial life cycle. I will also say that for some of our fintech founders, one of the challenges that they experience is being able to work in an environment where either regulators or other individuals within the government spaces have an understanding of what they're doing. And so that's something that I'm thinking about, how we can help be a bridge and a partner in supporting them in that vision so that they can actually be successful wherever they are, regardless of the economic climate.
Great. Olga.
Sure. So two things that we're seeing. I think one, a trend we're seeing from investors as economies in the US and Europe are slowing, is an interest in growth, right? Where's the next area of growth going to come from? And of course, Africa is the top of the list. So one of my jobs is to report our quarterly revenues to the CFO. And whereas Africa is smaller markets and the work that we're doing there is less than what we've been doing in the US, which is 20 years old, there's a lot of interest in what were the deals, what are the partnerships, what are the new opportunities that we're driving in Africa. There's a lot of appetite across the company and externally to see how are we really going to make a footprint on this continent. So it's really an opportunity for growth. And the second trend that I'm seeing a lot, especially in the area of financial inclusion and digital inclusion, in these more difficult, sort of challenging times, is the shift towards commercial sustainability and less on philanthropy. And I think the time of sort of investing with lower returns is gone, right? Now I think the demand is you need to invest, you need to drive social impact, you need to drive financial inclusion, but it has to also bring returns. So you have to come with partnerships and opportunities that are gonna be profitable over the long term. And I do think that is a shift that we've seen even in the last few years more and more. So both an interest as well as sort of that financial focus to make sure that it's sustainable and commercially profitable to do business.
Yeah, I think I think we're kind of still in this very uncertain stage, right? For me, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it's happening in our own backyard in tech or at Amazon with the layoffs that are occurring. So I think everybody is still kind of trying to figure out what does this really mean for the overall tech ecosystem as things progress. But having said that, from an investment perspective, people are still slightly bullish in fintech, whether it be here in the US or even in Africa. The only difference, which I agree with you, is that they're looking more around being more deliberate about the quality of the product value proposition that you're actually bringing to the table. Obviously the ROI as well. Whereas before in 2021 and 2020, I think there was this notion of FOMO from VCs, where they'll see like 3 VCs are investing in maybe a payment solution or platform in, I don't know, Zambia or Botswana, and everybody all of a sudden is kind of jumping on that bandwagon without really understanding what the value prop was. And I think now people are taking a step back to say, listen, if we're going to invest in this particular startup, we need to understand what they're going to bring to the table. Do they really understand the value prop? Is their company, with a decent amount of talent, and they're really, really taking their time to understand what you're bringing to the table. So it's still there, but everybody's being a little bit more skeptical and a little bit more deliberate in where they actually provide some funding. I think Africa is a long-term investment, so people are still bullish on the continent because they know that the return is going to come after a while, irrespective of the volatility that's occurring at the moment. So and that's kind of what we're seeing primarily on the continent.
Thank you so much. So my next question is around, obviously Zacharias and the team did not time this conference here out of the blues. There is the World Bank, spring meetings coming up. We have essentially governments, ministers are going to be in town. Also DCB, the home of the US government, that's not lost in me. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And I saw in the programs the issues of regulation and all that. So one of the misnomer, in my opinion, coming from a public institution, governments are viewed only as regulators, which are critical, policy tools that are needed to obviously protect the public, to protect the kind of the integrity of the system, but they're also partners. They can also enable you. So that I guess the dance that we do in terms of governments and startups and companies either could be a wrestling match or it could be a tango, depending on where you are, right? So within that realm of the two worlds that we live in, I'm wondering if the ministers from all over the world who are going to be at the World Bank meetings, if they're listening to this, what are the kind of insights that you have for them in terms of how they can cultivate fintech ecosystems in their respective countries? What type of partnerships do they should be seeing to help kind of cultivate and kind of grow that industry? So any of you could take that.
I'll just say just very briefly. My encouragement would be that those leaders should be curious about what's going on within the fintech space. There's a lot of movement and new innovations that come every day, and very often it's easy to be behind the ball in terms of what the new term is. And so I think if governments are more willing to come alongside, and even like central banking systems are more willing to come alongside from a learning posture and learning together, I think that will be very supportive to the ecosystem. I know we've had a challenge with one of our fellows that struggled to actually grow because they were dealing with issues within their country's banking system and a refusal to offer the licenses that they needed to operate because there was just a lack of understanding. So I think curiosity and just willingness to learn is very, very important.
So I'll add to that. I live and breathe work with governments, and I think one of the areas that I want to see a lot more governments take on is thinking about their own role in stimulating local fintechs and local small businesses. So I'll give you an example. Government procurement, not a very sexy topic, very boring, represents 12 to 15% of a country's GDP and is a huge opportunity for governments to stimulate fintechs, small businesses, women entrepreneurs, if they can partner with them in the right way. We did a white paper last year around all of the barriers that SMEs face when working to try to get a government contract. And there are so many. I don't want to read the whole 47-page report to you, but there are many things governments can do themselves to stimulate that small business growth, to stimulate those fintechs, to bring them in as their own suppliers, if they sort of change some of the ways that they're operating and doing business. And in that way, I think also there are ways, some governments are really advanced in partnering with the private sector. I think some governments are a little bit more early days, and it does take a different approach, different timelines, different definitions of success. But those governments that are really willing to sort of go out on a limb and partner with a new partner, like a private sector partner, I think are seeing a lot of rewards and opportunities. So that's what I would say.
Great. So this is my last questions to you. We have probably less than 5 minutes. So I'll love to hear each of you give your kind of concluding remarks in terms of your message or your kind of commentary around, because this is the first of many conversations today. So no pressure, but what are kind of your wisdom that you have for the group as we kind of kick off the day? Start with you.
Okay, so thank you again. I think, I mean, if we're looking at Africa, I would say doing business in Africa is tough, but it's extremely rewarding. It's tough not because Africans don't want, foreign investors or governments don't want people to do business. It's tough because, foreign investors particularly come in with the wrong mindset notion or lack of understanding of, the nuances, how to do business in Africa, how to scale, how to succeed. I think that's the bridge we need to, and the gap we need to fill. We need to build a bridge where, if it's from a US government to African government perspective, US private sector to African private sector perspective, where, we could have the right type of reverse trade missions where, we help investors on the other side understand what it takes to do business in Africa. We help governments in Africa understand why we need to have simple rules, simple regulations so that, companies can grow, companies can scale on the continent. I think the other important thing, again, to the last question around governments is, I think the mindset we all need to have is that governments, regulators, business, we all want the same things. Call it financial inclusion. On our side, we want adoption of our services and products. If governments are, concerned about security, data protection, we also want to satisfy our consumers and, build workable, scalable solutions that can solve everyday problems. So I think that's what I would say in closing. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I would say I would really love to see a growth and a rise of funding coming from African VCs. I love the statistic that the majority of funding comes from the US, but I would also love to see increased level of funding for African fintechs and African startup ecosystem coming from the continent. And also just more patient capital overall. And if I may use the platform that I have to just quickly make an announcement, because my team at Halcyon would kill me if I did not, and that is to simply say, if you know of any African food and ag tech founders, we are currently in open applications till the 28th of April. We are accepting applications for those founders. So yeah, look forward to welcoming that cohort. Thank you for the time, and thank you for the opportunity as well.
Sure. So I guess my closing thoughts is that we haven't even started to, like you said, scratch the surface of what we could do together. It is so early days, and the opportunities and the challenges in the world right now are so big. So my closing thoughts are to not let the past define sort of where the future goes, to not look at old models and old frameworks, old partnership, old ways of doing things define the way that we do things. I would love to come out of this conference with brand new ideas, brand new solutions, brand new ecosystem partnerships, to try things that we've never tried, because clearly what we've been doing in the past has worked a little bit, but there's still so much more to do, and the opportunity and the challenge is massive. So really, I guess I'm going into the day with a truly open mind, and looking forward to being surprised and inspired and trying new things.
No, I agree with everybody on the panel. But I think mine would primarily be just be more deliberate in terms of what your area of focus is on the continent, because it's so broad, and I know we like to reference it as a one thing, but there's just so many nuances between the different markets, and I think that there's a huge index on payments in Africa for obvious reasons, because it's fragmented and there's different nuances within the payment ecosystem, but I think that there's other verticals outside of payments that are growing within the African continent, and I think if you look into the other verticals kind of that are subsets of payments or outside of payments, they might be a large opportunity there that you can tap into, because I think sometimes you oversaturate on payments and you also oversaturate on the continent. So try to be as deliberate as possible on one particular area, in a particular region, in a particular segment, and I think you'll be able to see returns with patient capital, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. My two commentary before I close it is that the fintech space sometimes becomes its own cheerleader, meaning like it's a fintech. Fintech at the end of the day is a means to an end. It powers people's lives and all that. So there has to be a lot of conversations around what is fintech doing to support climate, to support agriculture and other things. So in a way that the important things, the grander challenges the world facing, especially the climate crisis, how is fintech contributing to that as a means? So and I have actually Alex, where's Alex, from Telesto, who we work a lot closely with, to work on that, so if you haven't. The second one is this issue about Africa and its being the future. So it's by saying it's not a question of affirmations. It requires people to actually do the work, and some of you are doing that work. If just saying it was the case, I'm an Arsenal fan, we would have won the Premier League for a long time ago. The only reason this year that is working is because we've made the right investments, whether it's the coach. I know Manchester United, they're pissed at me right now, but I have to use this opportunity to do that. The players to actually achieve that. I hope Man City would not mess up our game at this point. But the point is that it requires investments to get to the promised land. And just saying Africa is the future is not enough. It's a hard work. You have to create that future. So that's my concluding remarks. Thank you so much for indulging me. Thank you so much for your amazing conversation. So thank you so much. Please give them a round of applause.